William Tyndale was born around 1494 in Gloucestershire, near the Welsh border. Although the exact details of his birth and early childhood are somewhat obscure, it is generally agreed that he was part of a relatively prosperous family. The Tyndales were rooted in the agricultural landscape of Gloucestershire, particularly in the small village of Slimbridge, which was primarily engaged in dairy farming. This bucolic environment provided a tranquil backdrop that would influence Tyndale's profound connection to the English countryside and the vernacular speech of its people. Tyndale's upbringing in the rural countryside meant he was likely surrounded by the local dialects and customs that shaped his early understanding of language and communication. His family, though not of noble blood, was well off enough to provide for his education, a privilege not afforded to all in that era. His initial education probably began at home or in a local grammar school, where he would have learned the basics of reading, writing, and Latin, the language of the church and academia. By 1506, 12-year-old Tyndale had entered Magdalen Hall, Oxford, an academic institution linked to Magdalen College, known for its rigorous academic environment. At Magdalen Hall, he quickly distinguished himself as a diligent and capable student. At Oxford, he was exposed to a rigorous curriculum that included classical studies, theology, and philosophy. His education at Oxford was comprehensive, grounding him in the intellectual traditions of the time, while also exposing him to the currents of humanist thought that were beginning to challenge medieval scholasticism. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree on July 4, 1512, and later his Master of Arts on July 2, 1515. During his time at Oxford, Tyndale was influenced by the burgeoning humanist movement, which emphasized a return to the original texts of the Bible and other classical works. This movement was supported by scholars such as William Grocyn and Thomas Linacre, who introduced Greek to the curriculum after studying in Italy. Grocyn and Linacre were instrumental in bringing the works of ancient Greek philosophers and the New Testament in its original Greek form to the attention of English scholars. This exposure to Greek was crucial for Tyndale as it laid the foundational skills that would later become indispensable in his translation work. Tyndale's proficiency in languages, especially Greek, was notable. He immersed himself in the works of Desiderius Erasmus, a leading humanist and scholar, whose critical editions of the New Testament in Greek were transformative. Erasmus' work had a profound influence on Tyndale, shaping his understanding of Christian texts and inspiring his own translation efforts. Erasmus' advocacy for return to the sources of Christian texts, encapsulated in his motto Ad Fontes, to the sources, resonated deeply with Tyndale and became a guiding principle in his life. Around 1519, 25-year-old Tyndale moved to Cambridge, which was rapidly becoming a center of Reformation thought and scholarship in England. Cambridge provided a more progressive environment where Tyndale could engage with other scholars and reformers. Erasmus himself had taught at Cambridge, leaving behind a legacy of intellectual rigor and a commitment to biblical humanism. At Cambridge, Tyndale was part of a vibrant intellectual community that included influential figures such as Thomas Bilney and Robert Barnes, who were sympathetic to the reformist ideas spreading across Europe. The years Tyndale spent at Cambridge were pivotal in his intellectual development. The university was a hotbed of discussion and debate, with scholars regularly engaging in rigorous exchanges of ideas. Tyndale's studies at Cambridge deepened his understanding of the New Testament and further fueled his desire to translate the scriptures into English. He regularly participated in discussions and disputations, honing his skills in argumentation and rhetoric. Cambridge also exposed Tyndale to the broader European Reformation movement. He was able to read the works of Martin Luther, whose 95 Theses, posted in 1517, had sparked a theological revolution. Luther's call for reform resonated with Tyndale, who saw the need for similar changes within the English Church. The intellectual ferment at Cambridge, combined with Tyndale's exposure to Erasmus' works, solidified his resolve to translate the Bible into English. In 1521, Tyndale returned to Gloucestershire, where he became a tutor to the children of Sir John Walsh, a prominent local landowner and former sheriff of Gloucestershire at Little Sodbury Manor. This role not only provided him with financial stability, but also with the time and resources to continue his studies and theological debates. Little Sodbury Manor, a significant Tudor residence, became a place of learning and discussion, frequented by local clergy and scholars. Tyndale engaged these visitors in theological discussions, often challenging their views with his extensive knowledge of the Scriptures. Sir John Walsh and his wife Anne were influential in the local community and provided Tyndale with access to a network of people who were both curious and skeptical about the reformist ideas he espoused. Tyndale's insistence on using the Bible as the ultimate authority in these debates increasingly put him at odds with the established church. His views were seen as radical and dangerous, especially his belief that the Scriptures should be available to all people in their native language. Tyndale's outspoken views and his desire to translate the Bible soon attracted the attention of church authorities. While vernacular translations of the Bible did exist during his time, they were few and not widely accessible to the laity. The clergy, who relied on the Latin Vulgate for religious authority, were concerned about the potential for unauthorized and inaccurate translations that could lead to misinterpretations of the Scripture. The issue was not with translation per se, but with unauthorized translation, printing, and dissemination without ecclesiastical approval. Tyndale's determination to provide an English Bible without official sanction was seen as a direct threat to the Church's control over religious knowledge and doctrine. In 1523, Tyndale traveled to London to seek the patronage of Bishop Cuthbert Tunstall, hoping to gain support for his translation project. Tunstall, a respected scholar and newly appointed Bishop of London, had a reputation for being a patron of learning and a supporter of Erasmus. However, Tyndale's hopes were dashed when Tunstall, wary of the potential for radical interpretations and the political ramifications of an unauthorized vernacular Bible, refused to support his work. This rejection was a significant setback for Tyndale, but it also reinforced his belief in the necessity of his mission. Realizing that he would find no support from the English clergy, Tyndale sought refuge with Humphrey Monmouth, a wealthy cloth merchant sympathetic to reformist ideas. Monmouth provided Tyndale with both beneficial support and a place to stay. During this time, Tyndale continued to preach and refine his ideas, further solidifying his commitment to translating the Bible into English. Monmouth's home became a base of operations for Tyndale, allowing him to continue his work relatively undisturbed. However, his presence in London did not go unnoticed, and he soon faced growing hostility from church authorities. Tyndale's experience in London convinced him that England was not a safe place to pursue his translation work. The increasing pressure and threats from the church made it clear that he would need to leave the country to continue his mission. In 1524, 30-year-old Tyndale sailed to Hamburg and then traveled to Wittenberg, the epicenter of the Reformation led by Martin Luther. Wittenberg was a city alive with intellectual and theological ferment, providing Tyndale with both inspiration and practical support. Here he found a network of scholars and reformers committed to the same ideals. It was in Wittenberg that Tyndale began the arduous task of translating the New Testament into English, using Erasmus' Greek text as his primary source. Wittenberg was an ideal environment for Tyndale. The city was a hub of Reformation activity, and Tyndale had the opportunity to meet and learn from some of the leading figures of the movement. He engaged in discussions with Luther and other reformers, gaining insights that would inform his own work. The support and encouragement he received in Wittenberg were crucial in enabling him to begin his translation project in earnest. The process of translating the New Testament into vernacular English was a meticulous and revolutionary endeavor. Unlike previous translations, which relied on the Latin Vulgate, Tyndale's work drew directly from the Greek and Hebrew texts, ensuring greater accuracy. Utilizing Erasmus' Greek New Testament and Martin Luther's German translation as key references, Tyndale leveraged his profound knowledge of languages. His translation was distinguished by its clarity and accessibility, aimed at the common English layperson. Tyndale chose simple, direct language and had a keen ear for rhythmic patterns in English, making the text both comprehensible and memorable. He avoided complex theological jargon, opting instead for phrases that resonated with everyday speech. This approach was groundbreaking, providing a Bible that was linguistically elegant and theologically profound, fostering a personal connection to the Scriptures for English-speaking people. Many phrases from Tyndale's translation have since become integral to the English language, such as "Let there be light" and "the powers that be." By 1525, Tyndale moved to Cologne, where he began the challenging task of printing his English New Testament. This city was a significant center of trade and printing, making it an ideal location for his work. However, his efforts were soon interrupted by the authorities, alerted by Johann Kochelius, a staunch opponent of the Reformation and critic of Luther. Kochelius discovered Tyndale's plans and informed local officials, leading to a raid on the print shop. Tyndale and his assistant William Roy narrowly escaped capture and fled to Worms, another Reformation stronghold known for its safety and support for reformist ideas. In Worms, undeterred by the setback, Tyndale successfully completed the printing of the New Testament in 1526. These printed copies were then meticulously smuggled into England, hidden in bales of cloth and other goods. Eagerly read by the laity, who were hungry for accessible religious texts, the church authorities vehemently condemned the unauthorized, Protestant-produced vernacular Bible as a threat to their control and doctrine. The reaction was swift and severe. The English authorities, led by Bishop Tunstall and Cardinal Wolsey, condemned Tyndale's translation as heretical and sought to suppress it. Despite these efforts, Tyndale's New Testament continued to circulate widely, fueling the Reformation in England and attracting the attention of the royal court, including Henry VIII, who recognized the subversive potential of Tyndale's annotated translation. William Roy, Tyndale's assistant, played a significant but ultimately contentious role in the translation process. Although Roy provided essential help, such as writing and comparing texts, his character and actions eventually led to a rift between the two. Roy's penchant for producing satirical rhymes, which often attacked figures like Cardinal Wolsey, brought unwanted attention and danger to Tyndale's mission. After their work in Cologne was interrupted, Roy's indiscretions became too great a liability. By early 1526, Tyndale and Roy parted ways, with Roy moving to Strasbourg and continuing his own controversial writings. Tyndale, needing a more reliable and discreet environment, eventually relocated to Antwerp, a city known for its liberal attitudes and significant English merchant community. Despite relentless opposition, Tyndale continued his work from the relative safety of Antwerp. This community provided Tyndale with financial support and a network of contacts to help distribute his work. Antwerp's relatively liberal policies on printing and freedom of expression made it an ideal location for his efforts. Here, Tyndale revised his New Testament and embarked on translating the Old Testament, completing the Pentateuch by 1530. The city's vibrant commercial environment and supportive community allowed Tyndale to continue his translation work with reduced risk of persecution, ensuring that his mission to make the scriptures accessible to the English-speaking populace could progress despite the challenges he faced. During his time in Antwerp, Tyndale also engaged in polemical writings. His works, such as The Obedience of a Christian Man and the practice of prelates argued for the supremacy of Scripture over the Church and the state. These writings criticized the corruption and greed of the clergy and advocated for a reformation of the Church based on biblical principles. Tyndale's arguments were not only theological but also political, challenging the very foundations of ecclesiastical and royal authority. His bold assertions and clear language made these works both accessible and influential. The Obedience of a Christian Man was particularly influential. It articulated a vision of Christian faith based on direct access to the Scriptures and personal responsibility before God. The book is divided into three main parts: an explanation of God's law of obedience, how rulers and subjects should behave according to biblical principles, and a discussion on signs and sacraments. Tyndale emphasized that all people, from kings to commoners, were subject to God's law, and he famously stated, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord." This assertion resonated with many who were disillusioned with the existing church hierarchy and royal overreach. In the same book, Tyndale argued that secular rulers were ordained by God and must be obeyed, a stance that seemed to support monarchical authority. However, he also insisted that rulers were accountable to God and must be governed justly, according to Scripture. His view that the king is in this world without law, and may at his lust do right or wrong, and shall give accounts but to God only, was a double-edged sword, supporting the divine right of kings, while also holding them to a divine standard. This balance of obedience and accountability was revolutionary and appealed to those seeking both religious reform and political stability. Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, reportedly read The Obedience of a Christian Man and was impressed by its arguments. It is said that she presented a copy to Henry VIII, which influenced his thinking and eventually led to the king's break with Rome. This story, though partly anecdotal, highlights the significant impact Tyndale's writings had on the English Reformation. The book provided theological justification for Henry's assertion of supremacy over the English Church, thus facilitating the monumental shift away from papal authority. The Practice of Prelates, published in 1530, continued Tyndale's critique of the Church, focusing on the corrupt practices of the clergy and the need for reform. In this work, Tyndale was particularly scathing about the greed and ambition of the prelates, whom he saw as betraying the true teachings of Christ for worldly gain. He denounced the papacy as the Antichrist and argued that true Christian leadership should be based on humility and service, not power and wealth. Tyndale's writings, with their incisive critique and clear persuasive language, were instrumental in spreading Reformation ideas and challenging the established order. These works collectively fueled the fires of Reformation in England by providing a theological foundation for challenging both ecclesiastical and royal abuses of power. Tyndale's insistence on the accessibility of Scripture, coupled with his bold critiques of the Church, made his writings powerful tools for reform. They resonated deeply with a populace weary of clerical corruption and yearning for a more personal and direct relationship with their faith. Between 1530 and 1535, Tyndale continued to refine his earlier translations, addressing errors and enhancing clarity. By 1534, he had issued a thoroughly revised New Testament, celebrated for its precision and readability. Tyndale's work garnered widespread attention, leading to increased efforts by the Church and English authorities to capture him. Despite these challenges, Tyndale remained in Antwerp, allowing him to continue his mission until his betrayal and arrest in 1535. William Tyndale was betrayed by Henry Phillips, a man who had gained his trust under false pretenses. Posing as a friend and supporter, Phillips even borrowed money from Tyndale to cement their relationship. Possibly acting on orders from Tyndale's enemies, Phillips orchestrated a calculated and treacherous plan. On May 23, 1535, he lured Tyndale into a trap where local authorities were waiting. Tyndale was arrested and imprisoned in the castle of Vilvoorde, near Brussels, a notorious prison for heretics and political prisoners. This arrest was a significant blow to the Reformation movement, as Tyndale was one of its most prominent and effective leaders. Despite the harsh conditions of his imprisonment, Tyndale remained resolute. He continued his scholarly work, requesting his Hebrew Bible, grammar, and dictionary to continue his translations. His letters from this period reflect his enduring faith and commitment to his mission. In one poignant letter to the governor of the castle, he wrote, "I entreat your lordship that if I am to remain here during the winter, you will request the procureur to send me from my goods a warmer cap, a warmer coat also, and above all my Hebrew Bible, grammar, and dictionary, that I may pass the time in that study." William Tyndale's trial in 1536 was a significant event overseen by Pierre du Fief, Procureur General, and Ruart Tapper, the Chancellor of the University of Louvain. These two figures were prominent in the legal and academic communities, known for their staunch defense of Roman Orthodoxy against a rising tide of Reformation thought. Du Fief, a skilled prosecutor, and Tapper, an esteemed theologian, were both determined to make an example of Tyndale. The charges against him were severe: heresy, promoting Lutheran doctrines, and translating the Bible into English without authorization. These accusations, driven by his relentless advocacy for Scripture in the vernacular, carried the ultimate penalty of death. The trial itself was largely a formality, designed to silence one of the most vocal and influential reformers of the time. Held in the grim confines of Vilvoorde Castle near Brussels, the proceedings were swift and heavily biased against Tyndale. The courtroom was filled with ecclesiastical officials who viewed Tyndale's work as a direct threat to the Church's authority. Evidence presented against him included his translations and theological writings, all deemed heretical. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, Tyndale defended his beliefs with unwavering conviction, arguing that his translations made the Scriptures accessible to ordinary people, thus empowering them spiritually. His eloquence and steadfast faith, however, could not sway the predetermined outcome. Pierre du Fief and Ruart Tapper, leading the prosecution, were relentless in their efforts to convict Tyndale. Du Fief's role was to meticulously present the case against Tyndale, highlighting his unauthorized translations and association with Lutheran ideas. Tapper, with his deep theological knowledge, dissected Tyndale's writings, pointing out what he claimed were doctrinal errors and heretical views. They aimed not only to convict Tyndale, but also to send a clear message to other reformers. The trial was marked by a lack of fairness, with Tyndale denied proper representation and any real chance to defend himself. William Tyndale was found guilty of heresy and sentenced to death. On October 6, 1536, at the age of 42, he was led out to the place of execution, where he was strangled and then burned at the stake. His final words were reportedly, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes," a poignant plea for religious reform in England. Intended to quash the Reformation movement, Tyndale's execution had the opposite effect, galvanizing reformers and further spreading his translations. His martyrdom highlighted the severe measures taken by authorities to maintain religious control. Yet his influence continued to grow. Tyndale's translations and writings circulated widely, fueling the demand for a popular English Bible and contributing significantly to the eventual success of the Reformation in England. His enduring legacy profoundly influenced English religious life, cementing his status as a champion of religious freedom and the English Reformation. William Tyndale's contributions to the English Reformation and the development of the English language are immeasurable. His translations laid the foundation for subsequent English Bibles, including the King James Version of 1611. Tyndale's insistence on translating the Bible from original languages and his commitment to making the scriptures accessible to all English speakers broadened religious knowledge and empowered the laity. His work had a lasting impact on English literature, with many phrases coined by Tyndale becoming enduring parts of the English lexicon. His influence extended beyond his translations. His theological writings and debates helped shape the course of the Reformation in England. In recognition of his contributions, memorials have been erected in Tyndale's honor. A monument stands near his supposed birthplace in North Nibley, and another in London near the Thames Embankment commemorates his life and work. Tyndale's life and legacy continue to be celebrated and studied, reflecting his enduring impact on religious thought, language, and culture. His scholarly rigor, linguistic skills, and theological insights transformed religious practice and left an indelible mark on the English language, illustrating his relentless pursuit of religious reform and commitment to accessibility. Today, Tyndale is remembered not only as a scholar and translator, but also a martyr who gave his life for the cause of making the scriptures accessible to all. His work laid the foundation for the English Reformation and the subsequent development of Protestantism in England. Tyndale's translations are celebrated for their clarity, beauty, and faithfulness to the original texts, impacting countless lives. His legacy lives on through the enduring influence of his work on English-speaking culture and religion, resonating through the centuries as a testament to the power of words and the enduring quest for truth. As I see it, Tyndale's life exemplifies a remarkable blend of academic perfectionism, intellectual ability, and unwavering resoluteness to achieve his goals, qualities that stand in stark contrast to the mediocrity often observed in the contemporary Protestant sphere. In an era where erudition and the living practice of religion sometimes fall short, Tyndale serves as a paragon of European excellence, demonstrating how spirituality, creativity, and taste can be coupled with industriousness, seriousness, and steadfast tenacity. His meticulous scholarship and linguistic mastery were not just academic pursuits. They were driven by a profound commitment to his faith and the betterment of society. Tyndale's legacy challenges us to aspire to the same standards of excellence and dedication in our spiritual and intellectual endeavors, reminding us of the enduring power of conviction, hard work, and visionary purpose.